You're listening to the Oddscast, the original UFC betting podcast that's straight to the point. Hosted by leading MMA oddsmaker Nick Kalikas and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. They provide you the absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting. MMAOddsBreaker.com. Don't place your wagers without us.
Welcome to the Oddscast, presented by BetDSI. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts oddsmaker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC on ESPN Plus 26 event, which takes place in Auckland, New Zealand. If you're unfamiliar with our format, Nick and I will break down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Looking back at our last event, Kyle Marley lost 8.25 units for UFC on ESPN Plus 25 after going 0-2 on his premium bets. Kyle's track record speaks for itself, however, and he'll be looking to bounce back with this event. He has his bets and fantasy MMA picks available now on MMAOddsBreaker.com. Back to the present. UFC on ESPN Plus 26 features a 12-fight card in total and will be aired exclusively on ESPN Plus this Saturday night. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking off the fight card is a women's flyweight contest between Shayna Dobson, who is 3-3, and Priscilla Kushera, who is 8-3. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
A couple quick shout outs before we get rolling here, of course. Head over to betdsi.eu. That's our sponsored sportsbook. That's where I'll be quoting the updated lines from, so make sure you check them out. Much love for BetDSI. Also, head over to MMAOddsBreaker.com and check out our premium picks tab. As Brian just mentioned, Kyle Marley does have his premium picks and DraftKings analysis available right now, and it's definitely worth checking out. I know Kyle had a bump in the road last couple weeks, but it happens. I mean, the betting game, as most of you guys that are listening know, it's not an easy one, but long term it's where it's at, and overall his track record speaks for itself. So make sure you head over to Big Marley 3, check out MMAOddsBreaker.com on the premium picks tab and buy his packages. He's due for a bounce back win for sure. And getting right into the fight. I mean, this is another awesome fight to start off the cards because we should have fireworks in this ladies bout. I mean, Kushera, she opened minus 170, Dobson plus 140. And right now looking over at BetDSI, we're seeing Dobson at minus 204, Kushera's at plus 168. So basically the line flipped. And, more action coming in Dobson's way, which was right. If you guys hopped on Dobson at the plus money, I totally get it. This is going to be, like I said, a fun fight, really, because both these ladies like to stand and bang. Both of these ladies bring it. Both of them have power, and both of them are still developing and a little bit raw. So it's going to be, I don't want to say a slop fest, but there's definitely going to be times where this fight probably gets wild. I think more than likely it's going to stay up on the feet. Kushera does have, I think, an overall better mixed martial arts game than Dobson, but I think Dobson's athleticism, her size, her ability to probably keep this upright more times than not is going to win her the fight, because I think she will land a little bit more frequently and more often on Kushera and utilize her striking advantage, which should be like a firefight. Should be close, but I still think Dobson wins this fight that way. So not one I'm confident in, especially at the line now. I would not lay the chalk on Dobson at minus 200. I think people were kind of underestimating Kushera a little bit, but again, those of you guys that hopped on that plus money, I mean, it was a no-brainer for sure. She should be a slight favorite now, but again, am I willing to lay 2-1? I don't think so. At this point, it's probably a pass for me. So my pick is Dobson.
And I'm going to go on Dobson as well. Kushera's UFC debut, she got absolutely murked by Valentina Shevchenko, and it really hasn't gone anywhere better from there. I mean, she's faced lesser competition, and she continues to lose decisions against Molly McCann and Luana Carolina. So, Shayna Dobson, she's not the most talented fighter and not the most experienced, but she is pretty athletic and quick and has some decent power in her punches. And I just feel like Kushera is not going to be able to hang with her long term, especially coming in on short notice with a 3-fight losing streak. Her back's against the wall, and that could give her a little extra motivation, but I do not think she's going to be able to defeat Dobson. I just think Dobson's going to outpoint her on the feet, land the heavier shots, and potentially finish her along the way. So Dobson's going to be my pick. Now dropping down to the flyweight division. Now dropping down to the strawweight division, we have Loma Bumi, who is 4-1, taking on Angela Hill, who is 11-7. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds makers perspective on this one?
Hill open minus 180. The comeback on Luke Bumi at plus 140. And right now what we're seeing over at BetDSI is Hill minus 185. Luke Bumi is plus 153. So line margins have tightened up. Solid opening line. It's holding steady as we speak. And I think there will be some two-way action for sure continuing to flow into this fight. Obviously, Luke Bumi is a very popular fighter that's just breaking into the UFC. A lot of people are starting to recognize her talent. I mean, she did have some hype before she entered the UFC, and it's legit. I mean, she's looked outstanding. I know she edged out a competitive split decision win in her first fight, but I mean, you could definitely see the talent is there. If anything, she's a little bit small for the weight class, unfortunately. So that is something that bothers me a little bit. She should be fighting at 105. Obviously, UFC doesn't have that division, so she's fighting at 115. So she is going to be undersized in most cases in this spot as well. But as far as pure skill set goes, Luke Bumi is definitely the better mixed martial artist overall than Hill. I mean, Hill has made a lot of leaps and improvements throughout her career from the Ultimate Fighter show especially. She's become a true mixed martial artist. I like it. I mean, she's putting in the work. She's fighting, I believe, this might be her sixth time in the last year or so. I forget exactly what it is. So she's taking this fight on short notice. She's a true fighter, and she loves the game. And obviously with her skill set, I mean, she's towards the top of the division all the time. I mean, she's right there. So this is a huge step up for Luke Bumi. She's going to be undersized a little bit, like I said, but I think overall the skill level's there, and it's going to be a very competitive fight. So to me, I think Luke Bumi has the more diverse skill set. I think the striking on the feet is going to be close, despite Hill having a little bit of size and reach on her. I think Luke Bumi's counter attack is going to be good. She throws her angles, and it's a little bit different look than Hill's kind of used to at this point as well. So I think that's why it's going to be competitive on the feet. They're both going to be having success on the ground. I do give the edge to Luke Bumi there as well, but it probably does stay upright because Hill does have some decent takedown defense overall. So I'm expecting a back and forth type of fight. I'm going to go out on a limb and pick the dog here straight out and I do think obviously there's some value around plus 170, plus 160 on this because another competitive women's fight that has split decision type of fight written all over it for me as well. So at that price, it's a dog or pass situation for sure. I expect it again to be competitive. I'm going to pick Luke Bumi, but it should be a very, very interesting fight.
A ton of credit to Angela Hill for stepping in on really short notice to take this fight after a really quick turnaround because, I mean, she just defeated Hannah Seifers just last month, I believe. So that being said, that was one of the best performances of Hill's entire career. She was active on the feet, landing heavy strikes. She was great on the ground, landed brutal elbows and got a second round TKO. So I don't really expect her to be depleted or anything by taking another quick turnaround fight. She hardly took any damage in that last fight. So I think she's going to be in good shape here. Luke Bumi is a very talented fighter, but she's undersized. I mean, she should be fighting at atom weight, but the UFC doesn't have that division. It's basically in Invicta and in Japan and smaller promotions around the world. So for Luke Bumi to be successful against Hill, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for her. I mean, she just barely won a split decision against Albu, who is a very physically strong fighter, but is not nearly as technically sound on the feet as Hill is. So unless Luke Bumi can put Hill on her back, which again I think is going to be difficult because of Hill's size and strength, I think Luke Bumi is going to just suffer a little bit in terms of the size and speed and power against Hill. I mean, Luke Bumi might be able to hang with her speed-wise, but I just don't think that she'll be able to hang with her everywhere else. So I think that Hill, even though she's taking this on really short notice, it's a winnable fight. I think Hill gets the job done. I think she should be the favorite because she is the better fighter. I have her in my just fringe top, right in the edge of the top 15 in the UFC women's strawweight division, and I think she gets the win here too. So Hill is going to be my pick. Now, moving up to the flyweight division, we have Kye France, who is 20-8, taking on Tyson Nam, who is 18-10. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Kye France open minus 350, the comeback on Nam at plus 275. Right now, what we're seeing over at DSI is currently France minus 270, the comeback plus 215 on Nam as well. So line margins have tightened up. People gobbled up that plus money, that plus 275, almost plus 300 on Nam early on, which again was a great way to go at that opening line because the value is there. this is going to be another competitive fight. I like France. Obviously, I think he definitely, at this point of their careers, I think he's the better fighter. He's going to be undersized a little bit here. And Nam is kind of underrated. I mean, he had some success early on outside of his UFC career, getting some marquee wins, of course. But that said, he's had some setbacks. I mean, I think that Nam is one of those fighters that's a little bit inconsistent. Now he's starting to get on a little bit of a roll. He's actually performed relatively well in the UFC. I know that Pettis fight was a loss for him, but at the same time, I think that he still showed that he could compete and hang with the highest level guys. And I think this is another step towards that direction. I mean, France has been on fire. I know he had a setback recently as well with the Moreno fight. But you know what? That's a case where Moreno is just underrated. So that was an all-out, awesome fight. And this is going to be another competitive fight. I think this is going to have a lot of similarities. These guys are going to go back and forth. They're going to be pushing each other, and it's going to be close. So again, dog or pass situation, especially at the opening line, and still really at the current line. But for me, I still think that France is going to do enough. He's going to probably land a little bit more often. He's going to be a little bit faster. He's going to be a little bit of the more diverse striker overall. And I think I trust his chin a little bit more as well. And I think that he has a lot of good momentum going for him at this point. And I think his confidence level, the gym, everything about him right now in this spot and the location just kind of adds up for him to kind of squeak by and get a competitive but deserving win. So again, at the betting window, I wouldn't lay it though. It's probably a dog or pass situation. Where the current line is still, because again, with the judging, the state of judging, and if it's going to be a competitive fight, you don't want to be laying almost 3-1 if it probably hits the scorecards. So this is going to be one of those crazy back and forth fights, could possibly hit the scorecards. So don't lay 3-1. I would probably stay away from it because I do think France wins. So my pick is Kye France to get it done.
And I'm right with you on this one. Kye France is, I think, the more technically sound striker compared to Nam. But Nam does make up for it with power. I mean, he has the ability to knock you out with his hands. He's knocked people out with head kicks. He's definitely a dangerous striker. My problem with him is he kind of tends to sit back and wait for that perfect counter-strike opportunity. And if it doesn't come, he just ends up losing a decision. He has scored some quality victories at both bantamweight and flyweight throughout his career, but it does also feel like most of the time when he's brought into major promotions to face talented fighters, he just doesn't quite get the job done. So I think Tyson Nam here, he's going to have a puncher's chance or kicker's chance or however you want to say it because he hits really, really hard. And if he connects with something nasty, he could win by TKO. But if this goes to decision, and I do think it will, I think France will just be the more active striker and will score more points over the course of the fight and win rounds. So the only way I see Nam winning rounds is if he drops France and can't finish him in 2 out of the 3 rounds or something. So I think this goes to decision, and I favor France to win a decision. So France is my pick. Now moving up to the welterweight division, we have Kalin Potter, who is 18-8, taking on Kenan Song, who is 15-5. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Song open -285, the comeback on Potter +225. And right now what we're seeing is Song -217, the comeback on Potter +177. Interesting fight. I mean, again, Potter's one of those guys that isn't really going to get a ton of respect from the bettors, from the diehard fans out there overall, because he's just one of those kind of solid journeymen that's a well-rounded fighter, tough, aggressive, kind of grinding type of pace that he sets a lot of times. And again, he's got good experience, so you can't sleep on him. I mean, he's got underrated power a little bit. And again, that experience kind of carries a long way. And obviously he's bouncing back off of a loss with his first career UFC win, which was very important, obviously, to get his confidence level back up. So he is at a good state right now mentally. And again, this guy's a grinder that's going to bring it, try to push the pace on Song. But, Song is a different beast, though, I think. I know that, again, Potter had a little bit of success in his last fight against Patillo, but I think Song is honestly a level ahead of Patillo at this point right now, too. I think Song is a little bit more dangerous on the feet, even though, again, Coconut Bombs has some power. I get that, and Potter was able to survive that. But I still think Song's a little bit a different, technically speaking, of a fighter. And I think Song's going to do enough damage along the way. Potter's not going to be able to grind him out. He's going to eat too much punishment. So I do like Song here. I think, again, if Potter can survive it and make the scorecards, then it probably will get interesting and it might be a competitive fight. but I don't think it gets to that point. I think Song kind of snipes and picks him off. I think he is, again, the better striker. He's got a good enough takedown defense to keep this upright and make this, even if Potter tries to make this an ugly fight, I think he takes too much damage and Song probably gets him out of there. So my pick is Song to get it done. And again, at the betting line right now where it's at as well, I probably would avoid it, but at the same time, I wouldn't blame you guys if you're looking for a guy to throw in a parlay. Maybe Song is that guy right now, because again, as the line creeps down a little bit, the value starts to show a little bit more on Song. So again, if you're looking for a guy to throw in a parlay, maybe go that route, but don't go crazy on this card. So the pick for me is Song.
Song is probably not quite as well rounded as Potter, but he just hits way harder and Potter can get knocked out. Potter did have a nice little performance there against Pitolo in his last fight, but I mean, he got blitzed by Jalen Turner. He just could not handle the heat there. And Kenan Song hits hard. He started his UFC career off with a pair of impressive TKO victories against both Bobby Nash and Hector Aldana. Looked great in both of those fights. Now, obviously, those guys weren't super established UFC veterans or anything, but he had a nice bounce back performance in his last fight against Kye France as well. So, this is a guy that is dangerous, has a lot of power, and a lot of trust in his ability. And while I do think that Potter is the superior grappler, I just don't think he can get this fight to the ground and keep it there before he gets clipped, especially being a bit of an older fighter as well. So I'm going to side with Kenan Song. I think he doesn't just win, but I think he picks up a knockout along the way. Now, sticking with the welterweight division, we have Jake Matthews, who's 15-4, taking on Emil Weber Meek, who is 9-4. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Matthews open minus 240, Meek plus 190. And right now, the current line is minus 217 Matthews, to come back on Meek at plus 177. So line margins have tightened up. A little bit more action coming in Meek's way. You know what? I get it. I understand the early action. I mean, Matthews is kind of a head scratcher to me. Meek is as well. I mean, I kind of feel bad for Meek. I guess I'll start with him a little bit first. I mean, the UFC threw him immediately into the wolves. I mean, he had that crazy fight with Jordan Mein in his debut. And then after that, though, they gave him Usman, which obviously is the current welterweight champion, and then Fabinski in his last fight, which is another grinder. So they've been getting this guy grinded out, basically. Now they're giving him Matthews, which has the capability of doing something similar as well. Now, I believe that Matthews is, out of the three we just talked about, I mean, Usman is Usman. He's a champion. He's getting better. We saw the performance he had against Covington. So he is a complete fighter at this point and dangerous everywhere, obviously. But I still think as far as a complete mixed martial artist, Matthews is probably one of the better people that Meek's going to face, I mean, since his UFC debut, because Matthews can hang with you on the feet. Obviously, he's got that wrestling and he's got some submissions going along with it. So he has the complete package, and you have to be careful in all areas with Matthews. But Meek's a strong guy. Again, he's been in there with some really good competition even before his UFC debut. He's kind of one of those, savvy vets that, again, is only getting better. He's strong. He does have a shot in the feet here. I think Matthews, he's a little bit chinny at times. We've seen that happen to him as well. And sometimes his fight IQ does let him down as well. And Meek's all heart. And again, he's got that raw power. He knows what to be prepared for here. I mean, the last couple of fights, like I said, he's been getting grinded out. So he's been working that takedown defense for sure. So this is going to be an interesting fight. I'm leaning towards Matthews because he's clearly the better fighter, in my opinion. I mean, he has more ways to win this fight. I think he can win on the ground. He could win on the scorecards. I mean, possibly, obviously on the feet as well, even though Meek's a tough guy. But I think that, Meek's best path to victory is probably landing on that chin of Matthews, putting him out, rocking him, and maybe even stealing cards that way if it does hit the scorecard. So I think that's how he wins if he wins it. So there's more ways for Matthews to win. I get it. I'm going to pick Matthews, but again, at the current state where it's at right now, around 2-1, Meek is a tough guy. He needs to bounce back, get a win here. It kind of is keeping me off it. The line is where, I mean, even though I'm leaning Matthews in this fight, I don't want to lay that kind of chalk either. 2-1, I think, is a little bit too high, so I would probably avoid this fight as well. So my pick is Matthews to win, and what should be a pretty interesting fight here as well.
Yeah, and I think Matthews will win as well. He's the more well-rounded of the two fighters. He mixes things up better. He came from a bit of a wrestling background, and he's added more striking to his game, and his striking has really come along. Obviously, Matthews' problem, as Nick mentioned, is he does not have a great chin. His durability has improved since moving up to welterweight. We really haven't seen him get hurt that bad in any fights at 170 pounds, even though, guys up there hit a little bit harder. Matthews' biggest problem, honestly, is sometimes he just leaves his neck out there. and gets caught, like against James Vick when he was just diving headfirst into a guillotine choke. So I think Matthews will be in decent shape here. He's by far the better grappler compared to Meek. He's the better wrestler. I think even he might be a little bit more of a technically sound boxer, but Meek makes up for that with his power, because Matthews could definitely get himself in trouble there. But as long as Matthews doesn't leave his neck out shooting for a takedown or get caught, I think Matthews can either outwork Meek for a decision, grind him out for a decision, maybe even take him down for a TKO or submission along the way. I just really like all the paths to victory for Matthews, where in Meek's side, it really more relies on Matthews making a big mistake, which he has done before, but I trust him here, especially this close to his home country of Australia. So Matthews is going to be my pick. Now, dropping down to the lightweight division, we have Jalen Turner, who is 8-5, taking on Josh Kulibau, who is 8-0. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Turner open -140, the comeback in Kulibau, even money. And right now what we're seeing over at DSI is Turner -208, the comeback on Kulibau at +172. So line margins have tightened up a little bit. More action coming in, obviously, Turner's way. Kulibau, the undefeated prospect, a little bit of hype, a little bit of buzz coming into this fight. I mean, he's definitely an undefeated fighter that has a lot of potential. I do like what I see. I mean, he has that kind of ability on the feet to stand and make things interesting, because he does have some clean technique. He's got that killer instinct as well, has some power. So I do like what I see there. He also mixes things up with the takedown ability. He's got good ground and pound, and he has good jiu-jitsu skills. So this guy is definitely somebody to keep an eye out for. But the problem for me here with Kulibau is that he is, coming into this fight facing a much bigger opponent. He's fought at 145 before Kulibau has, and I mean, Turner's a big dude. He's going to have some length. He's going to have that explosiveness in him as well, that he has shown time and time again. And he's not an easy guy to kind of deal with. He's not an easy guy to take down and hold down either. So on the feet, this is going to get interesting, because if you look at Kulibau, I mean, even though he has some really effective striking and he has the ability to put people down, and if anything, Turner has showed that he, can get hit, clipped, and knocked out. So, I mean, Kulibau, you cannot count Kulibau out in that spot either, even on the feet, but Turner definitely has the advantage there. Again, a little bit more explosive. He's going to have that length, and Kulibau is hittable. So I do think that the early action on Turner is probably justified. It's just, I think that you're dealing with a guy that's making his UFC debut here in Kulibau, and there's still a little bit of an unknown factor. Like I think we can see some of these guys step up in their UFC debuts a lot of times. I know that we always talk about octagon jitters or whatnot, and people get nervous, and at times they don't always perform at their best for their UFC debuts. But then other times, I mean, if you're looking at, for example, Tim Means in his last weekend as well, I mean, that was kind of a bit of a surprise, because, I mean, he fought Daniel Rodriguez, a short notice replacement fighter, and it seemed on paper that Means was just head and shoulders above him, not really that impressive. I mean, Rodriguez, you could tell, had some skill on film before that fight and looking at things, but I didn't expect it to play out quite like that. And why I'm saying that is that we could potentially see Kulibau stepping in here and putting on a better performance than I anticipate as well in this sort of spot, because again, guys want to step up. They're getting that shot. So not always does the octagon jitters work against you. Sometimes it motivates you enough to make that highlight reel or make that outstanding UFC debut. So that's what you got to look for in Kulibau. He is definitely the more well-rounded fighter of the two, and he's capable of winning this fight, no doubt. But for me, I still like the athleticism. I like the mental state right now for Turner as well. I think he has the ability to do damage in this fight, the ability to hurt most people in this weight class as well. I mean, he definitely is a freak of nature with that frame, and he could do a lot of good things, and he's constantly going to be improving. So with all that said, I slightly lean towards Turner. I think the betting value has probably been sucked out at this point at around 2-1 or over 2-1. I think if you were going to get on it, -140 was probably the way to go. So at this point, it's probably another pass for me, but I do think I lean a little bit more towards Turner. So hopefully Kulibau almost proves me wrong and steps up here and gets I would be very happy to see him get a impressive UFC debut win, because that means he's definitely game and he's going to show up here and bright things are ahead of him. So I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be mad if I'm wrong here, but I'm going to pick Turner to win.
I've gotten burned quite a few times recently with UFC newcomers against relatively established UFC vets like Cass Williams against Morano as well. So it definitely has gone against us recently, but Culibao, while he is talented, he is also jumping up a weight class to take on somebody in Jalen Turner that's 6'3" in the lightweight division, and Turner hits like a Mack truck. So Culibao, while he is talented, he really hasn't faced that much of a level of competition, and I think he's really going to struggle with Turner's size and power. So unless Culibao can get inside and either potentially drag Turner to the ground and keep him there, or get inside and crack Turner, I think it's going to be Turner's fight to lose. Turner is beatable, but he's also very difficult to deal with unless you are extremely skilled. And while Culibao does seem to have some talent, up a weight class on short notice, I give him a lot of credit for the confidence and the guts, but I think it's just going to be too much for him on such short notice. So I think Turner doesn't just win. I think he probably catches Culibao along the way and knocks him out. So Turner's going to be my pick. Now moving on to the main card. In the featherweight division, we have Zubaira Tukhugov, who is 18-4-1, taking on Kevin Aguilar, who is 17-2. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Tukhugov opened -150, the comeback on Aguilar +120. Right now, what we're seeing is -112 Tukhugov, Aguilar -106. So line margins have tightened up, and there is two action in this fight. A little bit more action coming in Aguilar's way, but Tukhugov is starting to see some action back as we're looking at the market here as well. This should be an interesting fight, close fight, obviously. Pick 'em for a reason. It is a pick 'em type of fight. Tukhugov, man, he has all the potential, all the skill, a lot of hype coming into the UFC, of course, and he has a well-rounded game overall. I mean, the guy definitely has some good striking. He's got some speed. He's got a little bit of power. He's got some wrestling. He's got good takedown defense, but he doesn't put it all together enough. And I think he's honestly been a little bit overrated. I mean, a lot of these Russian fighters come to UFC. We expect so much from them, and they deliver most of the times. And Tukhugov is one of those guys, again, high expectations throughout. But if you're looking at his fight, every fight, again, he's fought decent competition throughout, but I mean, he's just been a little bit more too competitive. I mean, a little bit too much, competitiveness in every one of his fights for me. He doesn't pull the trigger as often as he should. I think his fight IQ at times isn't that great either. Now he's fighting Aguilar here in this spot where he's fighting a true vet that, again, he was been waiting to get into his spot in the UFC. Then Aguilar finally, gets his chance, and he really lights things up. I mean, Aguilar is definitely a fantastic fighter. I know he's coming off of setback to Ige in his last fight. That was a grueling fight. That was a tough fight, but it was a back and forth type of fight as well. But he did take some damage in that fight. So I think that kind of dropped his stock a little bit, but man, Ige is on a roll right now, an extreme roll. So I don't think that necessarily was a bad loss. And before that, if you look at Aguilar's resume and competition, the guy has definitely been on a roll himself. So there's a lot to like about Aguilar. I love his power. I love his demeanor. I love, again, his IQ. I love his toughness. He's got that takedown defense where you can't get him down and hold him down in most cases either. So he's game, and I think he's going to probably end up winning this fight. So this, to me, is a spot where, I mean, if it hits the scorecards, it'll probably fairly close, because both these guys are definitely going to be having a back and forth type of striking battle as well. But I just think Aguilar edges him out probably on the cards. And if there is going to be a finish here, I actually think Aguilar has a potential to maybe land that power shot along the way. If Tukhugov starts slowing down as the fight progresses, Aguilar still carries that power late with him as well. So more than likely it does probably hit the scorecards, obviously, and it's a competitive decision, and I think Aguilar gets it. But again, I do like that power he carries, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see something crazy go down in this fight with maybe a potential finish here as well. So my pick is Aguilar, and at a pick on price, I think there is a little bit of value left on Aguilar. You just can't go nuts because, again, more than likely hits the cards, and judges are judges. So the pick is Aguilar.
And I agree. Aguilar's a guy with a lot of power, had quality knockout victories before his UFC run in LFA against Damon Jackson and Tan Lee. And then, he was lighting up people like Rick Glenn in the UFC, had another quality win over Enrique Barzola. So this is definitely a guy that I think has a decent opportunity to have a good run in the UFC. He just ran into Ige while Ige was on his meteoric rise, who is now a top 15 fighter in my rankings. So this time around, Tukhugov, like as Nick mentioned, is a guy that I just think's overrated. He is extremely talented, but there's a difference between having talent and utilizing it. And it just doesn't feel like Tuhugov does enough in his fight. He doesn't push, the pace. There's not really much of a tempo there. He does throw hard and he mixes things up, but it's just not enough activity. And unless he connects with something really nasty, then he usually ends up, skirting the line and having really close fights. And it happens time and time again. His last, I think, 3 fights are 2 split decisions and a draw. So there's just not that much I like about Tuhugov. Even though he's crazy talented, he just doesn't fight to his potential. So I think as long as Aguilar, even though he might not quite be as talented as Tuhugov, as long as he's active and pushes a good tempo, I think he's going to outpoint Tuhugov along the way, and he hits hard enough that, as Nick mentioned, he could win by knockout, although I think that's pretty unlikely, as most Dagestani fighters are tough as nails. So I think Aguilar just outworks Tuhugov over the course of 3 rounds and wins a close competitive decision. Now, moving up to the lightweight division, we have Magomed Mustafayev, who is 14-3, taking on Brad Redell, who is 7-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Mustafayev opened minus 425. The comeback on Redell plus 325. And right now, what we're seeing over at BetDSI, minus 149 for Mustafayev, and the comeback on Redell plus 124. So it went from plus 325 down to plus 124. Crazy, because Redell should have now obviously ever opened at plus 325. I mean, basically what you have here is a striker versus striker matchup. And I guess that's a little bit unfair to say, because Mustafayev is definitely a Russian fighter that has more than just his striking ability. I mean, he has the ability to take the fight to the floor as well, has good wrestling, has good takedown defense. So he's definitely the more well-rounded fighter of the two here. But Redell overall has shown the ability, I think, to stuff takedowns pretty decent. He's not going to be an easy guy to control and get to the ground. So, and likely scenario here is that it probably plays out on the feet back and forth, and both these guys are outstanding strikers. They obviously have the ability to finish most, competitors in their weight class. Mustafayev's, man, that kick that he landed in his last fight, I mean, he just destroyed Fiziev in his, previous fight. So that tells you what kind of skill this guy has. I mean, he could just light you up quickly. I mean, you don't know what angle his kicks or his punches. He's very unorthodox, and he delivers with speed and accuracy he could definitely do some damage. Now, Redell, on the other hand, I think he's a little bit more of the technician here. I think he's a little bit more of the overall solid striker here. I mean, he's got that kickboxing experience. Obviously, he's coming from a good camp in city kickboxing as well, but I think he's a little bit more technically sound overall. I mean, he might not have that crazy unorthodox thrown at you, skill set that Mustafayev has, but he still, I think, is a little bit more defensively sound, and I think he's a little bit more, like I said, technically speaking, he can land the cleaner shots. I think he is a little bit more accurate, and he's not as wild, so that should bode well for him in this spot here as well. So I think overall, again, it's a back and forth type of fight, but Redell, I should say, is able to keep this fight upright. And if he does, I think he can actually start to take over, and especially in round 2, round 3. I think Mustafayev, he hasn't really been tested in deep waters all that much, especially obviously in the UFC. So I do see a tendency for him to start slowing down a little bit at times. And I think Redell can pick up the pace in round 2, round 3. Even if round 1 gets a little rough and Mustafayev does edge it out, I think round 2 starts to change complexion of this fight. And by round 3, I think Redell could possibly get him out of there. So my pick is Redell. It's still a dog or pass situation. Obviously, everybody hopped and took most of that value away, but this is a true pick-up type of fight. So if you're getting any plus money at all on this fight, you probably want to go that way. So the pick for me is Redell. And again, a little bit of value left on him as well.
Yeah, this is a battle between 2 really talented lightweights, and both of them feature fighters that are, with their styles that have had a lot of success recently in the UFC, with, Mustafayev having that Dagestani background, just a wild man, and Redell coming from city kickboxing, which has been one of the hottest gyms in the UFC in the past year. So it's extremely tough to pick against either side. But while Redell, I think, is the more composed striker, and if the fight starts to slow down, I think that actually would favor him. But I just don't know if Redell can match Mustafayev's pace. I mean, he is such a crazy wild man and throws so many aggressive strikes, mixes things up with really aggressive, powerful kicks and punches. He's just so entertaining to watch fight. I have to side with him. He's just so dangerous with what he did to Proctor, with what he did to Piotr Hallman, with what he did to the other Nurmagomedov, Abu Bakar back in the Sochi Star Cup, and then obviously Fiziev. This guy is really, really dangerous, and I just don't know if Redell can survive if he gets hit with something nasty. If it goes to decision, which I just don't think it's going to, I would probably favor Redell because I do think Mustafayev would slow down a little bit before Redell does. But I just think Mustafayev is just too unorthodox, mixes things up too well. I just don't think Redell's going to be able to hang with it. But he has proved me wrong before. He has some quality wins, not just his last fight, but he beat, Kenan Song before he even entered the UFC. So this guy is really talented and comes from a great gym. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm wrong here, but I am going to side with the Dagestani fighter and go with Mustafayev. Now moving all the way up to the heavyweight division, we have Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who is 16-6-1, taking on Ben Sassoli, who is 7-2. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
De Lima opened -150, the comeback on Sassoli at +120. Right now what we're seeing over at BetDSI is De Lima -149, the comeback on Sassoli at +125. So line margins tighten up. Not a lot of action coming in this fight. I don't blame people, man. I would stay away from this fight as well. I mean, this is two heavy hitters going out of here. I think Sassoli's basically the tougher, more durable fighter overall. He's had not the greatest luck thus far in his career, as of late especially. But that said, I still think he's durable. I think that he's a little bit underrated at times, and I think he's got the power to put De Lima out. Now, he's got to fight smart, though, to do so. Now, De Lima, on the other hand, I think he's always been a little bit overrated. Now, the guy definitely has a threat on the feet. He's got a threat on the ground, of course, as well. He doesn't have bad wrestling. He's got good ground and pound. He's starting to go towards that a little bit more. He's got a little bit of submission game to go along with it as well. So he does have some skill. I just think I've never been sold on him. Defensively, he's flawed. He's a bit chinny as well at times. Even though he's been looking a little bit better recently, I can't trust him. So this fight, I'm staying away from. De Lima is definitely the more capable fighter here. I think he's the more skilled fighter, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sassoli hits him, rocks him, and drops him along the way, even if Sassoli's losing this fight. So this is just a crazy fight for me. I want nothing to do with it, to be honest with you. I'm staying away from it. Hopefully it's a fun one. I would love to see a finish in this fight either way, and we might get one. So the pick for me is De Lima because he is the more well-rounded fighter, but I'm staying away from this from a betting perspective.
And I feel the same way. Sassoli, he's got a good sense of humor. There's this hilarious photo of him with a drawn-on six-pack weighing in. But overall, he's just not that talented of a fighter. He's got some power, and he's got a great chin. But other than that, I just feel like anybody with a modicum of overall skill should be able to outwork him. And while De Lima isn't the most reliable fighter, and he has let me down in the past, he's a guy that hits really hard, is the better technical striker, and should be way better than Sassoli on the ground. So I think if De Lima keeps this upright, he's playing with fire a little bit because Sassoli can clip him. But if De Lima drags this to the floor, I think it's only a matter of time until he either gets a submission or wins a decision with top position. Maybe a TKO on the canvas if Sassoli can't defend himself properly. But I just think that De Lima is the more well-rounded fighter, so I trust him to get the job done a little bit more often than Sassoli would. But Sassoli can definitely win by knockout if he clips De Lima along the way. Now dropping all the way down to the strawweight division, we have Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who is 12-5, taking on Xiaonan Yan, who is 11-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Yan opened -180, the comeback at Kowalkiewicz +150. And right now what we're seeing over at BetDSI is Yan -270, the comeback on Kowalkiewicz +216. So line margins have tightened up. All the early bettors hopping in on that value under 2-1, just over 2-1. Now we're seeing it, like I said, 2.5-1, almost creeping up towards 3-1. Wasn't sure how this line was going to go, to be honest with you. I mean, because Kavakevich obviously has a lot of, an established fan base, a good track record. I know that she's kind of hit some rough spots overall, but still, Jan is one of those fighters that I think, other than the diehard fans, I mean, she might not be as well known. So again, interesting, because when you factor in hype and popularity, sometimes where the line's going to go, I could see it kind of realistically dropping under 2-1 again, or, creeping up to where it did. So interesting. That said, I think it's probably about right. I mean, if you want to look at momentum, I think Jan obviously has a lot of it right now. Kavakevich, in my opinion, has kind of looked like a shell of herself. I mean, after you get to the top at a certain point and you compete the best of your ability and you're so close to winning that title, and it's kind of a letdown. And I mean, I think you kind of lose a little bit of something. You lose that hunger, you lose that edge that you have sometimes in training, or to, what to look forward to. And I think Kavakevich is kind of battling through that a little bit. So Jan is the hungry fighter. She's the one that's kind of on the rise right now, getting some quality wins. She's the one that should have success here overall. Probably, obviously, picking Kavakevich apart on the feet a little bit, but I'm not as sold as everybody else is in this fight, because Kavakevich still has that ability in her, to fight at a high level. And if she shows back up and we see a little bit of a glimpse of what we've seen in the past from her, this is going to be a very competitive fight. But I can't really bank on that. I can't trust that. Either can obviously the bettors out there. That's why they came in on Jan at this point. So I do lean that way. All the value has been extracted at this point. I would not lay almost close to 3-1. So I'm going to pick Jan to win this fight in what should be another competitive female, fight that hits the scorecards. I mean, the judges are going to probably see a 29-28 type of decision for Jan. And I think that's probably the way it should play out. But again, not a confident one, especially when you're laying 3-1. So I think Jan at this point should be the better fighter, and she should get it done. So I would like to see her get this win and kind of continue to excel and move up the ladder a little bit as well, and see what's next for her. So the pick is Jan, and she probably should get it done.
Yeah, Jan's coming off the best win of her career against Angela Hill, and she looked great in that fight. Really kind of almost coasted to unanimous decision victory. This time around, she's definitely taking on the most experienced veteran of her career in Kavakevich, but she is also fighting Kavakevich at the right time, because Kavakevich is struggling a little bit. Yes, she's on a 3-fight losing streak, but if you look at who she's lost to, Kavakevich, in her MMA career, has only lost to some of the best. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Claudia Gadelha, Jessica Andrade, Michelle Waterson, Alexa Grasso. 3 of those are either champions or title challengers, and 2 of them have been consistent top contenders. I'd say Grasso loss was her worst loss, most recent, because that's been the least established fighter that she's lost to, and that honestly was a little bit telling. It looks like Kavakevich has lost a step. She's 2 fights away from having been knocked out pretty viciously against Jessica Andrade. And since then, she got outstruck and lost decisions relatively one-sided to Waterson and Grasso. So I definitely feel like while Kavakevich is still a talented fighter, her style is not really going to be that effective in this fight. Jan is faster. I think Jan might be a little bit more technically sound. She mixes things up a little bit better. Kavakevich does still push a pretty high tempo and has good boxing, but I just think Jan gets in there and out. She gets hit less often. Jan has a better chin. So I just think when it's all said and done, Jan is going to be scoring more points, and she's going to be convincing the judges to side with her. Kavakevich has a little bit of power. She has, she dropped Jędrzejczyk when she fought her for the title, but couldn't finish the job. So I'm going to side with Jan here. I just think she's got all the momentum, and like I said, she's fighting Kavakevich at the right time in her career. So Jan is going to be my pick. Now, moving on to the co-main event of the evening in the light heavyweight division, we have Jimmy Crute, who is 10-1, taking on Michael Oleksiejczuk, who is 14-3. Now, Nick, where did this fight open, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Oleksiejczuk opened -150, the comeback on Crute at +120. Right now, what we're seeing, minus 132, Olasejek to come back on Crute plus 110. So Lima just have to tighten up a little bit to actually coming into this fight. Man, this is an awesome fight, really, because it's a battle of what I think are two legit prospects. I mean, that's why I love seeing this at light heavyweight already, because I mean, one of these guys is definitely going to take a big step forward and the other is going to unfortunately have a setback here. And both these guys kind of need to bounce back because they've had some, I don't want to say ugly losses. I mean, the Crute fight, Surkunov, he was looking good there for a minute. I mean, it was kind of back and forth, and then he ended up getting caught in that Peruvian necktie. So Surkunov, that was just a slick submission. I don't think Olasejek is going to end up getting Crute in a Peruvian necktie. So I think he's safe there in that spot. But that said, I mean, overall, Crute is one of those guys that's, I mean, he's aggressive at times. He has effective stand-up. I mean, his boxing. I mean, some people can look at his technique sometimes and think he's a little bit sloppy and maybe wild, and he definitely needs to tighten things up. Defensively, he is hittable. That's what I don't like about Crute as well. Defensively, I mean, all fighters get hit, right? There's nothing you can do. I mean, at this level, especially, you're going to get clipped. And I know I say that from time to time, but I mean, if he just takes a little bit too much damage. He marks up a little bit as well. And against Olasejek, that is not a good spot to be in, because Olasejek, I think, is basically a sniper. I mean, I think he has the cleaner technique. I think both these guys have enough power to put each other down, but I think overall, I like Olasejek striking. Again, defensively and offensively together, I think he's more of a complete fighter. Now, the point here, though, is Crute, I think, would try to exploit the ground game, because I think Crute obviously has a better ground game than Olasejek. And I think that he can try to get top position here, get some takedowns, and maybe exploit Olasejek on the ground. Olasejek is not easy to keep down, though. And again, I don't think Crute's going to be able to probably hold him there. But if Crute gets busy on the ground, lands some ground and pound, maybe gets position and looks for a submission, that could be a possible way to win. But I think overall, this fight probably does stay up on the feet. And I think Olasejek is a better striker, and he edges this out. And I could see him obviously winning this fight by stoppage as well, because Crute does, again, absorb a lot of punishment. But again, it's another awesome fight because it should be competitive against two legit light heavyweight prospects. It comes down to me. I trust Olasejek defensively a little bit more, and I think he has enough offense to get this fight done as well. So the pick is Olasejek, but it should be a good fight, and I'm looking forward to it because I want to see how this one plays out.
I think what really makes this compelling is this is a battle of two talented light heavyweights with a lot of power and potential, who both ran into somebody that outgrappled them and submitted them in their last fight, which is relatively rare. So both of these guys are really good fighters, and I think both can still be potential players in the light heavyweight division if they can get back on track. But as Nick said, I just think Olasejek is a little bit more well-rounded. I think Crute actually is the better athlete of the two. I think he's going to be a little bit quicker. He'll be able to dart in and out a little bit better. He might even have a better shot with takedowns than Olasejek. But as long as Olasejek can keep this fight upright and force Crute into stand-up exchanges, I think Olasejek will win those exchanges. And while both men are powerful, as Nick said, Olasejek is a little bit better defensively on the feet. I mean, he was able to withstand, a really good striking attack in his UFC debut from Khalil Roundtree and then win the next two rounds. So, I just think that, Olasejek can withstand what Crute is going to throw at him and then keep coming. And we've already seen Olasejek have enough power to get a quick finish, and he's shown that he has the conditioning to potentially play the long game. And I think that that's to his advantage here. So I'm going to side with Olasejek as well. I think that he wins a decision, if not potentially a TKO, if he really can start marking up Crute, maybe even a doctor stoppage if he cuts him. Now, moving on to the main event of the evening in the lightweight division, we have Paul Felder, who is 17-4, taking on Dan Hooker, who is 19-8. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
This fight opened exactly a pick 'em. Hooker minus 120, Felder minus 120. And right now what we're seeing over at BetDSI is minus 159 for Hooker. The comeback on Felder currently plus 131. So line marks have tightened up, more action coming in Hooker's way. At a pick'em fight, I think that probably is exactly pick'em fight. That is the way to go. Hey, you guys have been listening to the show. You know I've been riding Hooker here now for a little while. The improvement that he's made throughout his career, I mean, from his UFC debut to now is remarkable. He's one of the I think, most improved fighters that I've seen. I mean, he's got himself to the point where he's an elite fighter now. And I couldn't say that at the beginning of his UFC career. He was just an okay fighter, barely kind of, getting into the UFC, making it to the UFC. So, but he's put the work in, of course, with a great camp, great team behind him, mental game, everything is coming together for Hooker. He's never been better, and he deserves to be a slight favorite in this matchup here. But I think people are getting a little bit ahead of themselves with Felder. I think people are kind of disrespecting him a little bit too much here as well. Felder's a good fighter, man. I mean, he's always been a little bit underrated. And I know that the rise of Hooker has been phenomenal recently, but Felder's been pretty steady. He's steady good. That's what I like about Felder. And mentally, he's always there as well. He has that good, smart fight IQ. Obviously, he's doing some commentating as well. You can see that come out in the commentating. He does a great job with that. But I mean, that IQ that he has, I mean, he's smart. He knows how to game plan. He's got a good camp that's backing him as well. And this is probably going to be a striking affair. And if it is a striker versus striker contest, Felder can definitely hang with a lot of these strikers. I mean, he has a win over Barboza, which, I mean, again, MMA math, you kind of have to throw out the window in most cases. But if you look at it a little bit closer, I mean, Felder, again, coming off a win over Barboza, fought him a couple times. Hooker was doing well against Barboza, but then, I mean, that fight IQ and just how it turned into a firefight, he was just getting hit too much, and it didn't work out well for him, obviously. So, I mean, you can see, again, throw the MMA math out the window, but I'm just telling you guys to respect Felder because, I mean, he could compete with the highest level fighters, and Hooker is another one of those high level fighters. But this is going to be a lot closer, I think, that people are anticipating back and forth. So I think Hooker can edge him out. It's interesting to see if these guys, how they look in round 4 and round 5, because I would like to see both these guys in deep waters and see how fresh they still are in round 4 and round 5. I'm not quite sold on either one as far as complete conditioning goes. Now, both of them overall have decent cardio and I think are capable, obviously, of going 5, but this is definitely a test. And I would love to see this be a 5-round war and when we get to see just a great fight that goes the distance here. That would be awesome, honestly. I think a lot of people would agree if it's a fun fight, go all 5, so unless obviously you have the under in this fight, then you're not going to agree so much. But I think it has that kind of potential, though. It could be a 5-round war and one of the best fights of the year as well. So I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Hooker because I do think that right now where he's at, it's hard to not get on his bandwagon. But from a betting perspective, unlike most people out there, I'm going to stay away from it. And I'm not going to hop on that Hooker wagon in this fight. It's probably one that I'm going to sit back and avoid. Or if the line keeps on going crazy, I might actually have to put a little bit on Felder if the line gets too ridiculous. But for me right now, I'm going to try to stay disciplined and probably stay away from it. I think Hooker edges it out slightly. And for the majority of the bettors out there that are going Hooker's way, I mean, I think you might be a little concerned, especially as this fight progresses a little bit. I know you're going to be sweating this a little bit. So we'll see how it plays out. But my pick is Hooker, and I just hope it's an awesome fight.
And I'm going to come in the other way. As Nick mentioned, Felder is a really savvy veteran. And I think what he has going for him here is he's tough as nails. I mean, he's moved up in weight and fought guys bigger and stronger than Hooker that hit just as hard, if not harder. And I don't know if I've ever even seen Paul Felder hurt in a fight other than when he broke his arm against Mike Perry. Felder's a guy that has tremendous, striking, ability, very, very well-rounded, mixes things up with, the feet, the hands. And I think really that's what he has going for him is he can push a good pace and he can mix things up. And as long as he avoids getting into just a pure boxing exchanges in the phone booth against somebody that hits so hard like Hooker, I think, Felder's in a really good position. I did not expect Felder to hold his own so well with Barboza in the rematch after I watched Barboza outstrike him the first time. And, while I still think that fight was competitive and potentially could have gone either way, the fact that Felder was so competitive with someone with such elite striking ability like Barboza really impressed me. So, against Hooker, realistically, what Hooker has going for him the best is his power. I mean, he just takes people out. Since moving up to lightweight, he has destroyed most of his opponents. That being said, in his last fight, he earned a decision against Al Iaquinta, a guy that is a very talented striker and has held his own against some of the best in the world. So you do have to give Hooker credit for being able to defeat somebody of that caliber by decision. So I think this fight's going to be crazy competitive. If it goes to the ground, I actually favor Felder. Hooker does have some ability on the canvas, but Felder has really taken his ground game to the next level. I feel like if it goes to the canvas, Felder will have the better submission ability. I think Felder's wrestling is right there, if not better than Hooker's. And then in terms of conditioning, both guys have the ability to go 3 rounds fighting pretty hard. It'll be interesting to see what happens if it goes to those championship rounds. I think Felder has more decision experience. His last 3 fights have gone to decision. Hooker, on the other hand, has really only gone to decision a couple times. It was his most recent fight, but I just feel like Felder has a little bit better conditioning. So I think the longer this fight goes, the better it is for Felder. I think it'll be tough for Felder to get a finish because Hooker is so tough. I mean, he took the kitchen sink against Barboza before they finally stopped the fight. And I think with the accuracy of Felder as well, that could be something. Barboza was able to really exploit Hooker a little bit to the body, and I think Felder might be able to do that too. Now, I don't think he'll be able to do it quite as hard as Barboza was doing it, but I think that Felder, being just such a savvy veteran, will be able to do that. So I think if it goes to the ground, I favor Felder. I think on the feet, it's going to be competitive, and Felder has the chin to eat some of Hooker's best shots. And I think conditioning favors Felder. So even though he's the big underdog here, I'm going to side with Paul Felder. I think he wins by decision. So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC on ESPN Plus 26. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter, because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email alert if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsBreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Special thanks to BetDSI. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.